Uh, Let me do some very, very quick housekeeping. We have some incredible events coming up. Legend Series, Power Hours, Office Hours, all kinds of amazing stuff. You know where to find all that stuff in Mighty Network. So definitely sign up for all of this upcoming great stuff that we've got. From a in-person standpoint, we've got the retreat coming up in just really 19 days away, which is incredible. Robert Hamilton Owens will be there, Joe Jacoby will be there, and a whole bunch of people on this call are going to join us in Rhode Island for what is going to be an absolutely incredible retreat. We've got the fundraiser for Rayo de Sol at my house on October 17th. So anyone who wants to travel to the shoreline in Connecticut, you are welcome to come to our fundraiser for Peter Shaler and Rayo de Sol. Then we've got the Head of the Charles on October 19th. Then we've got Miami on November 15th, Rockefeller Center on the 12th, the Army-Navy game on the 14th. So all great stuff that I'm really looking forward to. Our next edition of Outlier magazine with Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, comes out next week. We, thanks to you guys, we have 2 issues in the books, and we have 26,000 subscribers to Outlier magazine. So thank you for all your help there. For anyone who's new to one of these calls, here's the format. Steve and I are going to chat like a fireside chat for 30 minutes, and then we open it up for live Q&A. So if you have a question for Steve, just put in the chat, I've got a question, and then Kathy will let me know and we'll tee you up and you can ask your question directly to Steve. But I am extremely excited. This was very strategically placed. So we scheduled this because my Vikings play Steve's Niners this weekend, and Steve and I may not be able to speak for a little while. So we very strategically placed this, and I am, as I told Steve earlier today, I'm hoping the Niners miss their flight to Minneapolis because that might be the only shot we have at winning this game. So what an honor it is to have Steve Cadigan with us today. Steve is a little bit of a badass, I got to admit. He's the founder of Cadigan Talent Advisors or Ventures. He's an advisor to, I still call it Twitter. I know it's X, but I call it Twitter. And Cisco and Intel and RBS and Salesforce and on and on and on. He's retained by Silicon Valley leading VCs like Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, Greylock, like the blue chips out there. He's appears regularly on Bloomberg and CNBC. He was recognized by People Hum as one of the top 200 most influential people in the talent space in the world. And he has worked at Cisco and Electronic Arts, and he was the first CHRO at LinkedIn in 2009 when they had 400 employees. And he saw them from 400 employees to their IPO. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, Kathy, get us started. Mike Perlow, thank you for creating that awesome introduction. Steve, what did you think?
I'm ready to go, man. That is a great intro.
You
Wow.
ready to roll?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you are traveling like crazy. You're in college mode with the kids. You got a lot going on, but I really, really appreciate it. And this whole topic, everything we're going to talk about in this hour is so near and dear to my heart because I am a people over everything kind of a guy. Um, I've got a million questions for you, but let's start with, why did you choose a career in talent?
It's a bit of an accident. I'm sure a bunch of you can relate to this. I went to college with no plan. The son of a minister and a social worker. My mom was involved in building sort of affordable childcare in low-income communities. My dad was a chaplain at a small private school, and business people were sort of the evil, like, don't go that way, whatever you do. My sister is a ordained minister. My brother's an artist, and my other sister's a creative writer. So I went to college and said, I want to go and have just an interesting experience. And I had no illusions of, trying to achieve a specific outcome. And I think when I graduated, I was even less clear on what I wanted to do with my life. But Scott, I wasn't worried, and I don't know where that comes from. I wasn't worried about it. I had some, fortunate genetic lottery that I'm a man, I'm tall, and I'm white. And so I took a job very quickly after school at a fashion company in San Francisco that was rotating people around. It was a spree, and it was very hot at the time in the mid '80s. And after one rotation in finance, they moved me into human resources, and it was love at first sight for me. And I realized quickly that everything I love about sports, which is looking at how people handle different situations, who responds well to different kinds of leadership and coaching, who plays well by themselves, who plays well in a team, who plays well with fast deadlines, long deadlines, and so forth, that there's a profession that would allow me to parlay my joy and just excitement in watching sports and athletics in the corporate setting and pay me for it. That got me excited. And so I started as a recruiter. And then as you start recruiting, you get into more things like the people you hire. How's it going? Oh, I don't like my boss, or this isn't really what I was sold, so I want to do something different. And now you get into what we call in the practice employee relations. And then you get into coaching, and then you get into helping the leaders sort of really build teams. And over probably 3 or 4 years of doing that, I said, I really, really like this. So I wanted to switch companies, and I went to an insurance company and took on much greater responsibility and worked I went from a tiny company, it was really small. We had a team of like 8 in HR, to an insurance company where we had probably 500 in HR. It was a division of Allianz. And that's when I got to really dip my toe in lots of other areas. And I thought, you know what? I really like this. People tell me I'm good at it. And so that's when I decided to go to graduate school and say, you know what? I'm going to lock in. This is my path. And I got a master's at University of San Francisco. So it was sort of, that discovery, I think, of everything that I loved about sports being something I could do professionally was really the ignition for me.
Before we get into the book, we have so many people on this call that are, I would call them LinkedIn devotees, or geeks or nerds, or they love, love, love LinkedIn. So
Mm.
uh, I did a little investigating myself, and I was like, wow, I joined LinkedIn November 29th, 2004. I was one of the first 1.5 million people. And I couldn't even do the math with now over a billion people. That's like way less than the first 1% to join LinkedIn. And I was very fortunate that when they launched certain things like LinkedIn Navigator, I got to spend some time with Jeff Weiner and Mike Gamson and some of the leadership team. Um, so I'd love for some inside baseball on those early days. You joined LinkedIn as the first head of HR, 400 employees, and see them through just exponential growth to an IPO. Just give us some stories about that time with LinkedIn and what that meant in your career.
Well, first, I just have to say that I really undercalled the challenge that I was going to face when I joined the company. I was a big company refugee. I thought, well, how hard can it be to build a business? You know, I mean, I've seen every mistake, I've made every mistake, and I wanted to use all those learnings and sort of try to build something the right way. But I'd forgotten a very simple core truth, which is I'd never built anything before. And I'd never started a talent function from scratch. So what's our philosophy around how many levels we should have? What's our philosophy around who should get promoted or how often? Or what's our compensation philosophy? Or what's our belief on performance management? Should we do reviews, you know, and should we not do reviews? And if we do reviews, should we have ratings? If we have ratings, what's the scale? And if we have ratings, should we tell employees? And what was so different for me was when you walk into a big company, you're sort of given the handbook and you're tuning it, right? You're trying to make it better. But when you're starting from scratch, there is no handbook. And it was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. And so I'll give you an example. And this is one sort of the thing that no one talks about at LinkedIn, which was our main product in the early days was the recruiting license. Like you have license to access our whole database and recruit in it. And that was our biggest stream of revenue and our most, sort of troublesome area as a company performing in was recruiting people to join LinkedIn. Like that, we were just missing the mark. And that was enormously stressful for me that, we couldn't let our customers know that we were having a hard time hiring people. And one of the challenges was that our chairman and founder, Reid Hoffman, I don't think he recognized that we really had nothing. Like Google was making more profit in a day than we were making in a year. And he's like, how come we're losing all these candidates to Google? I'm like, look at the math, man. We don't have a bonus plan. We have our crappy facilities. We have, no revenue. I can't match any of the salaries. Like they're triple, matching what we're offering people. And so, and that experience was a great forcing function for us to sort of really look at our navels. And it was a moment I'll never forget where we sat around as a leadership team and they're just, kicking my teeth in like, Steve, it's this is your responsibility. You're failing us. I'm like, listen, I've never been here before, number one, but number two, you got to give me something. Like we have nothing to compete with these companies with. And I mean, Apple, Facebook, Twitter. And then I don't know if you remember, Zynga was really hot at the time.
Mhm.
Groupon was really hot at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was a candy store of career choices. And you're fighting over a very scarce pool of software engineers, which, I call like endangered species when you're trying to really grow. And so what we realized at the time was we asked a really simple question. I use this a lot with entrepreneurs today. Why would anyone want to work here? Like,
Mhm.
why would someone work for less, leave something that maybe has, an on-site childcare center and a sushi chef? Why would you want to come here? And that was a great forcing function for us to surface who we really were. Like, why do you want to come here? And then that led to another question. Well, what assets do we have that no one else has? And the greatest asset we had was the problem we're solving really matters, helping people find their dream job.
Mhm.
And we could vision and mission any company if that's what we're laying down. We said, oh, you want to go to Facebook and help kids develop their short attention span capability and proliferate fake news? That's what you want. Great, you go ahead and do that, but we're going to help people find their dream jobs. Oh, you want to go to Google and be engineer number 7,000, buff the trophies of people who created the code before you and be assigned projects you don't even know what they are? Okay, you can go ahead and do that and get paid a lot more. Or you can come here and put your fingerprints on building something that's going to change the world. What do you want to do? And that forcing function, I think of, us continuing to not be able to meet the recruiting bar forced us to sort of recognize that the only asset we really have is the one that costs us nothing, and that's building a great place to work. And then it might have been Mike Gamson, someone said, well, if we're the professional network, shouldn't we be the best place to work? Isn't that our birthright? Like, we should own that. We should be the greatest place anyone's ever worked. Otherwise, what credibility do we have being a professional network? And then we said, okay, so what can we do? Well, we can tell everyone that we hire, this will be the greatest job you ever had. We will give you so much learning and experience and exposure and opportunity that no other organization will give you. And that unlocked for us the difference in being able to recruit really great people. And once the word started getting out about our culture being a place you wanted to be and the problem being one that you wanted to solve, I didn't have to recruit as much anymore. People found us. And that was really that changed it. It was a huge lesson for me. Like, listen, I'm all about culture, but I never saw the power of a culture until that moment, and it flipped. And here's also, part of the story was Jeff Weiner, the CEO at the time, had never been a CEO before. And this is another sort of inside baseball story.
Yeah.
Nobody on our executive team, if you're an investor pre-IPO, you look at a roster and go, yeah, no, I don't think so. First time CEO, CFO never taken a company public. All of us had never taken a company public or really been in a private company before. And none of us had ever scaled an organization. And so if you're a betting person, you're like, yeah, probably very low odds that they're going to do it. And one of the things that I realized, and it didn't hit me at the time, probably a few years after the PTSD wore off from that whole experience, was that not having done it gave us enormous license to do it our way. And we didn't know what we're supposed to do. And so that opened up a whole lot of creativity. Plus, we wanted to do it better than anyone else had ever done it before. And the fact that we were able to pull it off, and there were a lot of wins at our back that helped us. But the fact that we're able to pull that off really changed my thinking around sometimes maybe lack of experience gives you some grit and hunger that experience doesn't. And, we're building a new industry. There was no place we could go recruit people and say, hey, have you done this before? Because the talent wasn't there. So we had to build it. And that meant we're putting a lot of people in positions that they'd never done before. That was amazing. And then another side of the story, and then I'll flip it back to you, that I found was really interesting. Recruiting became the most important thing in the company, not new products, not, purchasing some new, company and getting new market share. We knew that building a world-class team was the number one operating priority, ahead of sales, ahead of product milestones. And so that meant when you're a leader on the front lines and you're prioritizing your week and your day, closing a candidate was more important than going to that product review meeting if we had an open position. And so let's take sales, for example. If it's Q4, we're not going to make our number or we're behind. It's all hands on deck in most companies. At LinkedIn, no. The head of the department is out recruiting, and their lieutenants were put in their position of sort of interim leaders to recruit, and that was so motivating for them. All these people were getting elevated because their leaders are out recruiting, and that, I think, gave us a lot of more muscle than we realized at the time. So many lessons from the challenge of just scaling like that.
Yeah, I used to talk to, I don't know if you remember Ben Tebow. Ben was one of your first salespeople and a super good friend of mine. And, he talks about those early days, and he's still there with a lot of reverence. So it's pretty cool. Now 12 years, I think, removed. When you look back, what's the biggest lesson that you learned?
I think just to reinforce what I said, I think putting people in positions that don't have all the experience you need can unlock enormous energy. That's probably one. Number two, you don't have to have been world-class to be world-class. That sometimes the lack of that experience really emboldens you in ways that you might not feel that you have the license to do otherwise. And those are probably the biggest ones for me. The last one was a hard lesson that we learned through some bad outcomes. And that was when we were really hitting our stride, we thought, oh gosh, we're going to be a $1 billion company. Let's go hire some people who've led $1 billion companies, because we don't know how to do that. Have you done it? No. Have you done it? No. Okay. So let's go hire some people who've done this. And so we bring in some leaders, particularly in the sales side and the marketing side, who manage multi-billion dollar portfolios. And within weeks, they're a deer in the headlights. They're just frozen. And our clue was initially with their first week was like, so I'd like to open these requisitions for 6 administrative assistants. And we're like, yeah, we don't do that here. We don't have admins here. Like, we're scrappy, bro. And so what we learned was there's a huge difference between managing at scale and building to scale. And that profile we got wrong a few times. And so we had to sort of exit them out and try to help them recover their career trajectory. And then recognize that, yeah, we need people who've really built. And at the time, Scott, there weren't a lot of hyper growth experiences. Right. I mean, Google and VMware had really grown super fast, but now you have a lot of people who've been through the hyper growth, and Facebook was growing with us and Twitter was growing. So there wasn't a reservoir of talent. And that was a big, hard lesson for us.
Workquake might be the best title I've ever heard. It's such a good title. And so I think a lot of people think that this book was written pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, but it really wasn't. It was pre-pandemic, if I'm correct.
That's right.
But I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of this stuff. So I mean, things look on the surface very bleak, and maybe they are. I mean, we're going to get your opinion. Turnover is at an all-time high. Disengagement is off the charts. Shelf life for certain job skills is rapidly diminishing.
Mm-hmm.
Employees are, pardon my French, scared shitless about AI and automation. It seems like a pretty bleak landscape. Do you share that opinion?
Well, let me phrase it this way. It's a bleak landscape if you believe our traditional measures of business vitality are meaningful. For example, if you really believe that the best teams are ones that have been together the longest, yeah, this is a hard time for you. Mm-hmm. If you believe that you can create value and bring in new people and new ideas and accelerate hitting new markets with new people, then you recognize it. Maybe this is the way it's going to be. So one of the, and those frustrations, I think, for organizations are super high right now. Like as an organization, it terrifies me that my talent have more choices and visibility to opportunity than any time in history. We have more new industries. We have more new platforms giving transparency to what you can do. We have more companies comfortable you working remotely. And so as a parent, I'm super excited. My kids can, they want to be YouTube influencers, like, oh, right on, like, let's go. That means no employer. That means doing what you do on your own. And that's really terrifying for an employer right now, that they've never reconciled that. And I deal with hospital associations around the world. I deal with city governments. I deal with, education industry associations, and they are freaking out right now. We've got more nurses leaving the profession. We've got more educators leaving the profession any time in history. And they're not leaving because necessarily, oh, bad leadership or the compensation's not good. It's they've just got a bigger buffet table of opportunity. And that's one of the things that I think is really hard, Scott, is that we don't have a lot of new measures for what vital business can look like. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so one of the ways that I try to give comfort to leaders is, this company's way over benchmark, but I'm going to use them anyway. Let's just look at Tesla for a second. Tesla is worth more based on market cap than Ford, General Motors, Honda, Toyota combined. And throw in Mercedes and BMW. They're still worth more than all those companies combined. They've been around less than 25 years. Their turnover right now is, or their retention is 2.3 years is the median tenure. And all the other automobile manufacturers, it's 5+. Okay. So what do the investors think that Tesla can do that people who've been doing it 100 years, have all this experience and expertise, can't? And the answer is innovate. And so it's interesting. And that's how I think the world has flipped. And that's why I think, Workquake was so timely to try to help people see there's a new reality here. The fact that they haven't been encumbered by all these policies and process that are tangling up their decision-making capability is disabling them from being able to move quickly. And the investors get it now. They go, this company can move faster. And that's why they, Tesla figured out electric way faster, because you're going to have to cannibalize. We've seen this story before. Automobile business doesn't want to cannibalize their entrenched market share. So, but that's the truth. Here's another hard reality. If you ask anyone, let me ask the group here today. The tenure in the last 10 years has gone from Americans staying in organizations, knowledge workers, not farm workers, from 5 years to 4 years. And the age, people over 50 are, the median tenure is 10, and people 20 to 35, it's 2.5 years. Okay. That's the 10. And that, median means half the number is below 2.5 and that 20 to 35. And some of you have children in that category, so you know what I'm talking about. But listen, one question that people want to get into when we talk about the data is, well, why is that? And I say, no. That's an important question, but let's ask a bigger one. Do you think that's just a moment in time? that in the next 5 years, we're going to start seeing people stay in organizations longer. Do any of you think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see tenure increase?
No.
No. Okay. So that's a big moment, because if you believe that, then how have you designed your teams? Most of your teams are designed to, build for long tenure. Most of your rewards are all about long tenure, more vacation, more 401k match. It's all tenure based. But you just all admitted, just like every other executive ever asked a question to, yeah, it's probably not going to be realized. So what do we do? Well, first thing is, if you have more people leaving, you have more alumni than you've ever had. Are you talking to those people? And if you're like me early in my career, I went to the Tony Soprano School of HR, which is you quit, you're dead to me. And now we got to talk to these people. Like I go to these hospitals and say, how many nurses you lose last year? We lost 300 nurses. Okay, what are they doing now? We don't know. They quit. They don't think we're sexy. So, oh yeah, we're not sexy. You're not sexy. What do we want to talk to them for? So you want to talk to them because they might come back. And maybe they left for a travel nurse opportunity and got 4x the pay, but now they're missing their family. They want to come back. Why are you making this a binary in or out choice? And so that leads to, we're going to need to start to, I believe, build ecosystems. We need to build ecosystems that we're creating value, not just with everybody in our walls. And that's a little bit troubling for the intellectual property lawyers of the world. But I believe that I don't think there's another alternative. The other thing is, we're going to have to build teams faster. We're going to have to design jobs so it doesn't take 6 years for someone to learn how to do something.
Yeah.
And so these are really hard steps. And the reason why this turn to changing the architecture work is going to be so difficult is because funding for companies and business planning and finance plans do not account for these kinds of things, right? One of the other crazy ideas, which people don't like hearing, which I firmly believe, is that jobs in the future are going to be 50% learning and 50% doing. And all business plans today, if you believe that jobs are changing fast, people need new skills, you're not going to win that war in the open market. You're going to have to build your people. You just have to. So you're going to have to design. And I'm not saying everyone goes to school while they're in your company, but in a way, you have to give them new projects, new assignments, and new challenges. And I learned at LinkedIn, there's enormous merit in that. Now, it's also, not something that works in every organization. Like in a surgery room, I don't want people coming and going. Like I want continuity. And so when I'm talking to the hospitals, they said, what do we do about the surgery teams? Because 6 people, it's tight. You're going to have to make, I said, you're going to have to make that team 16. So because someone's going to go. And now if you have a more extended team, you got a bench, people can sub in, and they haven't built bench, And so the question, and again, the financing for this and the budgeting for this isn't there yet. The recognition is starting to get there, but I think it's going to be a while before people really start preparing for, I'm expecting my team's going to probably leave, and I need to be prepared for that.
I love that whole concept. When I talk to founders, when I talk to them about the 99% of people that are going to interview that are not going to get the job, and when I talk to them about their alumni, people that have lost, I always tell them, you have 2 choices. They can be advocates or adversaries. If they're advocates, you've got a really good chance of winning. If they're adversaries, in deep trouble. So I love that you hone in on that. Why do you think that talking about being human is more important today than ever?
Oh gosh, this is a real trigger question for me. I feel that, artificial intelligence right now is the greatest opportunity we have to win back our control of our relationship with technology. We have lost it. And exhibit A is email. Is email making us more productive? Is it giving us more time? Or is it a vehicle to take time away from the people we're sending the emails to? We haven't mastered email. We think we're going to figure out artificial intelligence. And I feel like, AI is already like, gosh, I'm starting to sell courses now on, building an AI strategy and building a great culture and so forth. And I can create those cultures. And someone said, can you give me a little abstract of what that is? I fed that right into Perplexity and ChatGPT. I said, here's my course, here's my video, here's my PowerPoint. Can you make me an abstract? Boom. And using that allowed me to spend my time doing more human things rather than grinding on stuff that wasn't really a best use of my time. And I think increasingly we're going to see that we have the tools and the capacity with AI resources to really see that our differentiator is our ability to connect, our ability to lead, our ability to, grow followership. And I think we're increasingly craving that, honestly. You've probably all seen or heard of that famous TED talk called Alone Together or Together Alone. We're more connected than we've ever been, and we're more separate than we've ever been. Like, how is that serving us right now? And I think, I talked to my kids. My oldest last year had to declare his major. And he said, Dad, I'm thinking data science or finance. What do you think? And I said, yes. And he goes, no, data science or finance. And I said, yes. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're learning to think and be creative and be curious, it sounds cliche, but I truly believe that's your differentiator in the future, because I'm going to be able to address a lot of my fundamental technical needs with technology right now. And so that's, I believe, how it's going to play. And we're already starting to see that play out in the market.
Steve, I have a million more questions for you, but unfortunately I'm being told that we have got a army of people that are ready to fire some questions at you. Are you ready?
Let's go.
All right. We're going to go to London first. So Isabel, you're up.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, Steve. It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm about to pick my daughter up from a jazz class, so if I get inundated by small girls, I'll have to clock off. I wanted to ask you, and I'm so fascinated by what you said about that advocacy, because as an actress, certainly with my actress hat on, you have to continue that dialogue with directors and casting directors and producers throughout your career. If you leave with a bad taste, you'll never work again. So that advocacy is something I've never really consciously thought about until you said that. So I'm really grateful to you for that. And I completely agree. I couldn't agree more with what you said. I'm going to challenge you a little bit, if I may, on your, when you said genetically, you got lucky in terms of where the interest came from. And so I would really love to know more specifically, perhaps, was there somebody or something that pulled your attention towards people? And if there was, could you share that with us, please?
Sure. Listen, I think the genetics really gave me more opportunity than I might have if the genetics had been different. I think that's what I was referring to, and I'm fully acknowledge that. However, I do think that sitting in church for years, watching my father speak and connect really seeped into me, and watching my mother, and I would go help my mom at these daycare centers and help with whether it was cleaning up or janitorial or food, really making a difference in people's lives. We were kicked out of South Africa in 1970. My dad was seen by the apartheid government as a bit of a rebel subversive, which I don't think, I don't think he was, but okay, that's fine. It's their choice. And living with that awareness of difference was really powerful to, I think, open my eyes at a very early age, subconsciously, to there's different perspectives, which has led me over the course of my career to be, I think, I've been blessed and cursed with being extremely empathetic. I can see the world from someone else's eyes clearer than most people that I come across. And I didn't realize that was a skill until someone said, whoa, how did you know that I was thinking that? I said, well, I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm trying to see how you see the world. And that's really helped me along the way build trust fast. And that's been extremely valuable, I think, for me in a profession that's filled with just conflict. It's always like manager, employee, manager, boss, subordinate, and I'm having to broker, try to create a comfortable reality for two people that saw the same thing but experienced something different, and that's just so I love it. It's like the greatest art in the world is the art of trying to coordinate people doing that. So I think the hunger was sort of fostered early, and I think being a student of my parents was really powerful. But thank you for calling me out on that.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Matt in Calgary, you're up.
Awesome, Steve. I have a kind of a two-pronged question, and I want to make sure I give lots of space for everybody else because there is lots of questions for you. My first job as a 16-year-old was at McDonald's, and it does seem to be a very resilient brand who has developed a system and a process for high employee turnover. They can train people very quickly, and they can get teenagers up to speed, and the business can almost run itself. So I'm curious if you're seeing other businesses that are resilient in that way, that they have such efficient training and development programs that anybody could run it. Because I'm curious about that. And then the second piece I wanted to ask you is more of a question for everyone else here. You were talking about creativity, and I'm curious if you have a tip or something you could share with us to promote that state of being.
Sure. Well, let me first say, I think fast food is a fascinating domain. And one of the examples that I use, two companies that are really doing something very interesting are a company called Chipotle and a company called Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A posts ex-employees on their career website, ex-employees. And the ex-employees say below their picture on the website, "Thank you, Chick-fil-A, for helping me realize my dream of becoming an emergency room nurse or a fifth grade school teacher." And Chipotle similarly says, "We know we're not your dream job. We're fast food. We want to be the best part of your journey." They've embraced it. They accept it. We're fast food. And I think they're fast food, but I think every organization needs to recognize, there's so much more choice that people have today. And they're not leaving you because you're not nice. They're leaving you because they see they want to try something new. We all do. And so I think that's a great example. I was at a conference a few years ago, and the head of HR from McDonald's said, "We got our turnover down this year to 400%. And I thought, I do not want that kind of stress. But you're right. That is a practice where, is the human a differentiator in that? Maybe, maybe not. But your capacity to make people productive quickly is very powerful, very, very powerful. And I think we all have to look at that. One of the examples I like to use for the American sports fans attending is college basketball. So over the last 15 years, what's happened in college sports is that your best athletes only stay 1 year and then they go professional, and especially in basketball. So what have coaches had to do? I've had to teach a simpler offense and a simpler defense. I've got to start team building really, really fast because I need to build a world-class team in 6 months before the tournament. And I think there are a lot of holdouts. Like, we don't want short-term thinkers here. We're all about the loyalty. And then they start losing to, Sister Mary's School for the Blind. And they're like, uh-oh, we better sort of raise our game here and figure this out. And so I think there's definitely some lessons to be learned there. But I'm also wary of organizations where they're working hard to eliminate the need for people. Like, fast food is like, if we don't need people, that's our biggest expense. Like, let's try to create a bunch of robots. Like, okay, what about the job creation for the people creating the robots? Like, let's talk about that. And that's the biggest miss for me with AI, is all the discussions around how we're going to eliminate jobs, not how we're going to make jobs more interesting, impactful, exciting, dynamic, and beautiful. And then on the creativity side, and I have a TikTok that went viral about this, beware the company that has an innovation department. Like, what? Shouldn't everyone be innovating, right? And I think that, sorry if some of you are, chairman of the innovation department, but I think, creativity, it's hard to say, hey, you got to be more creative. One of the things that I've tried to help organizations with is this, during this transition of AI, is saying the companies that have an experimentation culture are going to have an edge with AI. They just are. And I was just proven right by the most conservative, least experimentation-oriented company in America, Walmart, just gave an AI, tool to every one of their salaried employees, saying, here it is. We don't know what you're going to do with it, but just find ways of, doing cool stuff. And they have found so many ways of creating greater, customer experiences, creating greater ways of managing inventory, and improving business operations. And that was beautiful. It's an experiment at grand scale. Here's a generative AI tool. You figure it out and tell us. And now they just expanded it from 50,000 employees to 75,000 employees. So I think sometimes we as leaders overprescribe, and we feel that we have to over control. And I think we're really going to be challenged by that. So the opportunities now for more experimentation, and I think that will lead to greater creativity. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but that's what I think about. Yeah, thanks. And by the way, I was in Calgary last February. I've never heard a sound like tires crunching on snow like I did in -30 walking down the streets of Calgary. Oh my
It's
gosh.
the worst.
Matt, I'm going to give you two recommendations. This is actually for everybody. So, two great books on creativity. I'm reading Rick Rubin's book right now. Rick Rubin is a legendary music producer, and he just wrote a book called The Creative Act, which is phenomenal. And most of you know I'm really into kids' books. This book called The Dot is phenomenal. So if you don't want to read 500 pages of Rick Rubin, you could read like 20 pages of Peter Reynolds and read The Dot. Anyway, two recommendations on creativity. Bruce in Portland, you are up with Steve.
Steve, I love your insight into HR and the workplace and stuff. I've been covering that as a journalist for 36 years. However, I want to ask you about this in your background. So are you a drummer, as I am? That's really where my passion is.
I am the biggest hack drummer you could ever imagine. I was in a high school band. We could play Brown Sugar from the Rolling Stones, and that was about it. And about 6 years ago, a friend of mine had this set in his garage and said, give it to me, hoping that my kids would sort of like gravitate down here. And it's led to a little bit of experimentation, but I do let off steam from time to time. And the online self-training, like on YouTube's right now, to learn different styles and so forth is phenomenal. So I haven't had as much time to do it, but it's a great backdrop here.
Love it. Who's your favorite drummer, real quick?
Who's my favorite drummer?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I would say, only because he's sort of featured a lot, is what's the name of the Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer who looks like Will Ferrell?
Chad Smith.
Yeah. Chad Smith. Yeah.
Love it. Tom Doherty in California, you're up.
Steve, across the bay in Castro Valley. I'm a
Right
docent over at the Oakland Zoo too. So if you ever come by, I hang out by the wolves every Sunday. You want to come up? I have a question for you around, I love the leadership piece. I've always treated my people that way when they left. And I always found it funny, right? Because people would come to me and be like, I'm sorry, but I'm resigning or I'm leaving. And they'd be freaking out. I'd be like, where are you going? What are you doing? Like, and I'd be excited for them. I mean, thank them for all that they gave me and all that they did. And later on, sometimes I would try to rehire those folks.
Yeah.
And I got such pushback from the soprano level executives that would say, what are you doing? You can't bring him back. He left us.
Right.
And I always got around it. But as you pronounce that stuff and go out, like, does the light go on, or do they still feel like that's the way to go?
Unfortunately, the middle management goes, yeah. Can you tell those people? Because we, just like you expressed, right? Like, we get it, but we're not sure that they get it. Right?
Yeah.
I'll give you a funny story in a similar vein. I was hired by middle management from 3 Fortune 50 companies during the pandemic to help them build an argument for their senior management who was mandating that they have to go back to the office. And they go, no, we're way more productive. Results have been off the charts. We feel that our lives are more productive at home. And management says, no, you got to get in. And when they said why, they said, because we've got this great fitness center. We've got these great things that we paid for. And I challenged them. I said, let's drill down a little bit further. What are they really afraid of? They're really afraid of that they haven't built a business sustainably that's all remote. So they don't know what the outcome is. They know when you're together, they're going to realize their outcomes. They don't know the impact of teamwork when you're not all together. So I said, so you have to, if you want to negotiate with them, we first have to see the concern that they have from their perspective, have some empathy for their point of view. And then let's do the data, because what their biggest challenge was hiring people, and everyone they called, the first question was, can I do it remotely? And they're just like, we can't meet this. So I'm disappointed. I think about, when I share these stats particularly around turnover and building alumni communities, I still feel, generally speaking, that we're at the acknowledge we have a problem phase, not at the let's figure out how we work our way through this phase. And that's disheartening to me. I've been to probably 30 states in America over the last 2 years helping these hospital associations, and not one has said, hey, Steve, would you, they listen to me, they go, yeah, great stuff. Yeah, thank you. And I was like, okay, well, it's great to be here. Thank you for the sugar high. I guess I'm just going to go. You don't want to talk some more about this? Like, I'm telling you what this is. I would love to be invited in to help you work through this. For example, why are you making your nurses have to quit to be a travel nurse? Why don't you get in the travel nurse business? By the way, that's a lot more profitable and a lot easier to run than a hospital system. And you're allowing people to not have to leave the system. And it's probably just a period of time. So when they come back. And the second thing is, are you giving your employees free healthcare? Well, no. I was like, why? What does it cost you to give your staff free healthcare? And if you did, would they leave for somewhere else? Probably not, because it's one of the biggest expenses, right, that we have in the States. So it's old ways of thinking based out of security, and so it's not because they're not smart. I think it's because they're afraid.
Yeah. I think the thing I've seen too with a lot of clients is they're so committed to these facilities. They spend so much money in real estate and they spend so much money on all of this stuff. I think Airbnb right now has 10% of their staff coming in on a weekly basis. So what do you do with all that real estate? What do you do with all this stuff? So it's a huge challenge.
Right. And I think they may be worried that they're perceived of having made bad decisions if they wind up selling it. Well, then why'd you buy it in the first place? And having to face that. So they were going to stand behind rationalizing an old decision. Right.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rich in Florida, you're up.
All right, Steve. Staying on the lines here of old ways of thinking, you talked about the tenure coming down, and dramatically so for some of the newer working generations that are coming in. I think as the tenure has come down, we've seen the rise of the side hustle or the rise of consultancies, right, that are popping up, doing fractional work here and there. So I would love to get your take on where you see all of that settling down. Do you think companies adjust and start working with that dynamic more? Or do you see them adjusting their priorities and some of their policies to start to draw people away from that and back into the workplace full time?
Yeah, God, it's so interesting. How many stories have we heard, Rich, of a company? Hey, we found out this guy's got a side hustle. And then it's like, well, but they were meeting their goals for you. I mean, they're everything you set out for them. So what do you care? And it's just an interesting debate. I think we're at a place where it's sort of old is meeting new. Like if you don't want someone to do a side hustle just because you don't want them to do a side hustle, I don't think that's good enough. If they're not delivering on what you need, that's another thing. How can you begrudge someone from wanting to get ahead and take care of their family more and earn more income? Like, come on. And so, old ways of thinking is, intellectual property, conflict of interest, these kinds of things. And in some cases that's real and that's fair. But I believe that what the cognitive science is starting to reveal, which I think is really fascinating, and I'm studying this right now as I work through my second book, which is the more diversity we have in what we do, the more creativity gets triggered. The longer you keep someone just doing their thing, and this is how the architecture works broken. Like, you got to stay in this track, you can't apply for another job until you've done it for 3 years. And if we like you and you got good ratings, then you can apply to somewhere else. In Silicon Valley, it's like, hey, if the person's not happy, they're gone tomorrow. They're going to go across the street and double their pay. So you got to build the right environment and the right culture. So I think in markets where talent is scarce, I think we're going to see more creativity. But I still think that there's a lot of resistance out there from this being something, and a lot of people are doing the side hustles dark. There's a whole website out there to teach you how to do a dark side hustle. Like, and even things like, don't tell your family, don't tell your neighbors, like, oh, okay, and here's the website you use, and here's how you, like, it's a shame that has to go that way. But I think what we're learning is the more people have diversity in what they do, the greater that their creativity and their output is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Mark Holden in Chicagoland.
I got to tell you, this is an amazing conversation, Steve. And the more you talk about empathy and brokering viewpoints between different parties, the more I'm realizing that it's a function of curiosity. You know, staying curious allows you to be empathetic and understand viewpoints to pull together. I'll be quick. My question is, well, it's sort of in line with the last few here. If the old ways have been geared around compensation plans that keep people sticky for a long time in terms of like vesting schedules and 401k matches, equity compensation, how then can the macro shift of short-term compensation and benefits packages change to keep people more satiated? I mean, I totally get at the highest levels that people are going to bounce around and ecosystems are built, but there's still a bit of a friction involved with the larger, even regulatory environment of how a business gets off the ground and continues its maturation process.
Yeah. Here's my perspective on this really good question, Mark. I believe that the society has done a heck of a job at scaring the hell out of the employees of the world. Artificial intelligence is coming for your job. Automation, we're going to go through a digital transformation. We used to have a joke at LinkedIn when a company announced digital transformation, let's go see how many people update their LinkedIn profiles, because they've got a signal. And so where I sit on this is that I believe employees are more loyal than ever. They're just not loyal to companies. They're loyal to learning. We have scared them. So they want to take control. And if you want people to stay, you have to make it them more capable of leaving. Make people more employable. Don't make people, make them better for the future, right? And then I think they're going to be loyal to you as a mentor and a coach forever, right? And think about all the mentors you have in your universe. It's someone who really still got your back even after you left, right? And so I think that's how I think this is probably going to have to play out, is we just have to recognize that people are loyal to learning, not necessarily to a company. And if you feed that, and it's not just a classes or tuition reimbursement, I'm talking about a new project or new assignment. We discovered something by accident. I'll give you a quick example here at LinkedIn. We had a real problem hiring salespeople, and so for selling our recruiting product. And so I had not a lot of recruiters, so I had struck a deal with the head of sales. Let's hire new grads, put them in recruiting for 6 months. They learn the product, and then after that, they'll go and sell. And now they've lived with it because we didn't have salespeople that knew our product. So we did it. And then half the people that came in to be recruiters said, I don't want to go to sales. I love recruiting. And it's like, because they didn't know, right? And that's why I think the learning, it gives people the exposure to how they can apply their skills in new ways. And now you've got people sticking around doing things they never thought was even a possibility, right?
Awesome. Heather in DC. You're up.
Hi, thanks. Steve, thank you. I'm having some flashbacks from my corporate career with this discussion, so thank you. I focus on working moms and helping them better integrate personal, professional lives, and more importantly, the leaders who need their talent. How do they better support all caregivers? So my premise right now is that women are leaving the workplace, not the workforce, and I think both women and the mother labor participation rate being so high backs that up. I would love to hear what you're seeing as far as companies that are best supporting women, whether they choose to become mothers or not, but moving up the career ladder, corporate or otherwise. But how are we supporting them in companies that you're working with?
Well, here's the sad reality. I don't have a list. I don't.
Isn't that sad? Yes.
And that's sad. And you could substitute that with diversity in general. How are we doing with the billions of dollars we poured in? How are we feeling? Like we're feeling like it's going well? Yeah, not so much.
Gone backwards.
Mark Benioff, one of the most charitable donors. I mean, say what you want about him as a character. He's a real unique individual. He has poured hundreds of millions and hired some phenomenally talented people with, quote, diversity background. And what do they have to show for it 3 or 4 years later? Zero. So I think this is a bigger, more complex problem than maybe we realize. But I do think it's worth trying to understand. And I think the organizations that can see, and there's a great story about General Electric found out in Asia, the best way to grow was to hire women. And because their competitors weren't, and they got some phenomenal, success stories out of that. But right now, I do see what you're seeing, women leaving the workplace, not necessarily the workforce. And good news is there's more opportunities than ever before. Is the growth opportunity there? I don't know. You know, time will tell, because we're still at the beginning phases of that transition. But gosh, I sure wish I had some examples to get us excited.
Thank you.
All right, we've got 2 more questions. We're going to try to squeeze them in 4 minutes. So Paul in Florida, we're going to you, and Jerry in Chicago, you're our cleanup hitter.
Steve, thank you.
Talk today.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been an incredible conversation. One of the things that you talked about is like not having the experience kind of gives you the permission to kind of do it your way. And I'm really curious because over the past couple of years, I've seen like a huge shift on LinkedIn where people are starting to kind of incorporate their personal life into their professional life. And kind of going back to what you were saying, this idea on human connection. I'm wondering, like, what do you think is going to be the next evolution of LinkedIn? Like, what do you think is something that is there now that people aren't utilizing that they can, you know, kind of be ahead of the game to dominate the space?
Oh gosh, I would have thought by now some other solution would have come to disrupt LinkedIn, but here we are. The LinkedIn is still, you know, running the show. I do think you've hit it, Paul, in terms of the Fred Kaufman. I just finished his book, Conscious Business, which is just a great quick read if you're interested. And he says, why do we say work life? Because if you say work life, it connotes that you're not living when you're working. Like, I'm very alive when I'm working. I love what I do. And there's all kinds of benefit that I get participating in that. And I think we're going to see people sharing more of that, because you still see the apology when someone's talking about their daughter going through cancer, or their spouse who died, or a coworker who just passed away, or something. Like, that's real. You know, I like that stuff, but there's a lot of people, no, you know, that shouldn't be here. Like, I'm sorry, you know. And I know we're triggering Lindsay right now, because it's like, it's all about the heart and being real. And I feel like in a world where we have more ways to disconnect, you know, I've had so many employee disputes where people were firing emails against each other, and they're in the same, like, a cube next door, and they're not standing up and having a dialogue. So I think, you know, this is sort of my wish list for LinkedIn, that I think there's going to be greater efforts for more human connection there, you know, than, you know, me beating my chest around, look at all my badges. And the other thing, this is a huge one, that's the holy grail in the world of talent right now. It is skills certification, skill accreditation, skill validation. Do you have that skill? Because skills are going to be more important than jobs in the future. And that's sort of my last mic drop here, is I really believe that's where it's going. So we're going to see badges, we're going to see credentials. And the hardest thing about skill validation is that it's really subjective. Like, is he a good leader? Well, she thinks you're horrible and he thinks you're great, you know? And so some of the harder skills to quantify are going to be tricky, but I think we're going to see some crowdsourced, you know, accreditation in that space.
Yeah, I love that. I think like connection is built personally, not professionally. And that's why a lot of people are missing on LinkedIn, because they just go straight for the pitch without figuring out, like, is there even any alignment? So,
and LinkedIn struggles, right? Because the biggest pollution in LinkedIn is the user, right? Like, you all get the same, you know, emails I do. Someone did not look at your profile and says, hey, do you want to do this job? I'm like, you didn't look at my stuff, bro. Like, no, I don't want to do that, you know, and I'm not qualified. And that's hard, because you got to monetize with lots of users.
Steve, you mentioned one of my favorite people that I ever met, Fred Kaufman. I think when I met him, what was his title? He was like the chief philosopher or something crazy. I don't know. He had some insane title at LinkedIn, but man, what a smart, like, super ahead of the curve guy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
He's high signal. Yeah.
Amazing. Jerry in Chicago, you're a cleanup hitter.
Hey, Steve. First off, I am a recruiter, have been for many years, and I've been on LinkedIn for so long that I can say that in the beginning, Reid Hoffman personally called me twice.
Awesome.
One time to ask me a question and another time to yell at me. And he really yelled at me. He didn't like something that I'd posted. but I'm curious that I could ask you a million questions, but I'm curious about the management of different generations in the workforce. I'm having so many conversations with leadership about this and how they should handle it.
Yeah. Okay, this is another triggering subject for me. I feel that generational blame is a easy cop out. It's way too easy, and I don't like being categorized. I don't like being lumped in a certain thing. That's the biggest reason when I was in Spain a few months ago, like, hey, how's it going? Oh yeah, we can't hire people. When we do, they don't stay. And well, why is that? Oh, the young generation, those people, short attention span, career sugar high, shopping for promotion, disloyal. To which I said, your children that you raised, that generation? I'm like, come on. It's like, you can't tell me that 40 years ago, if you could see all the choices of things that you could do, that you'd still be in banking and insurance today. I mean, come on. And so I really feel it's been an easy target for us to, and we're great at this in America in particular, blaming somebody or something. And I think it's a miss. It's a real miss for me. That being said, I think there's great opportunities for us to be more aware of each other's perspective, and not just generational. I mean, we're talking like education and background and race and gender. Like, we're all bringing all that together, and there's enormous merit to us finding ways of bringing those people together. So I'm not a huge fan of like, let's talk about everything that we should know about this generation. That said, I once saw this woman, God, what is her name? I think it's Lynn. I was at a conference and it was a generational speaker. I'm like, oh, here we go, and she was awesome. And I'm going to remember her name in a second. And she said something like that just blew me away. She said, kids today don't need to leave their home to date, to hang out with friends. Because I'm sitting here like, I got these teenage boys. I'm like, get out of the house. Like, I never was home because there was no phones and no television in my house. And I was just going to be asked to do something I didn't want to do. So I'm out. And so, but kids today have the capacity to do that. And one of the really interesting things I'm seeing in my son's friendship network is these dating relationships are staying a long time. And I'm like, why are these kids together a long time? It's super interesting to me. It's because we have the capacity to background check basically our potential partners way more as teenagers than ever before. And in our early days, like, well, we're going to find out, is this person like me? Do I like them? And now that vetting process is really intense. And that's just interesting, for us to be learning these things. But I really try to be careful around using that discussion as a reason to, sort of assign blame for some kind of organization dysfunction. Yeah.
Steve, this has been absolutely phenomenal. The hour flew by. Your wisdom is unbelievable. We love learning from the best of the best. Guys, buy Workquake, leave a review. Even for a successful author like Steve, reviews mean a lot. I can't thank you enough, my friend. We'll see what happens on Sunday with our Vikings and Niners, but for now, we're friends.
I'm already ready. My texts are already ready to get going, Scott. So you're going to hear from me. But no, thank you so much. And thank you for the thoughtful questions. I mean, I love just hearing what's on the top of everyone's minds. And I hope we get a chance to do something like this again. So I really, really appreciate it.
Steve, you're the best. Have a great day. And we'll talk Sunday. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. That was fun.